This is a prison here in Izium, which was used by Russian forces as they had their headquarters here. And people told us that there were people facing torture in these cells.
There are places soldiers don't go, because there's no war there. There they break, basements without light, cells without names, wounds no one treats. A full-scale war is raging in Ukraine, but there's another one. Quiet, invisible. It hides in basements, in windowless rooms where torture replaces trial and silence is the sentence. That's exactly where she went. Victoria Roshchina, a Ukrainian journalist, voluntarily crossed into occupied territory. Her goal was clear: to uncover what's hidden inside the torture chambers that exist on no map. She was captured. For a long time, nothing. No updates, no trace, only a letter. Your daughter died in prison. No body, no proof, no goodbye. A year passed. On February 14th, 2025, during a prisoner exchange, Ukraine received the remains of 757 dead. The last body, number 757, was listed as unidentified male. Her condition was so mutilated, they couldn't even tell the gender. Only a DNA test confirmed. It was Victoria Roshchina. A mummified body, shaved head, signs of torture, a broken rib, multiple abrasions, evidence of electric shocks, hemorrhages in the soft tissues of the temples, right shoulder, and shins. No brain, no eyes, part of the trachea missing, the hyoid bone broken. This is the story of a person who tried to speak the truth and was destroyed for merely trying. This is the story of Victoria Roshchina. She was first detained in Berdyansk on March 15, 2022, at the very start of the full-scale invasion. She had traveled alone to eastern and southern Ukraine to report on the war. Her destination was Mariupol, already encircled at the time, and she was heading there as part of a special convoy. But along the way, she was stopped and taken. She was detained for photographing Russian soldiers in the occupied city, a journalist doing her job. Later, pro-Russian media and propaganda channels released a video of Roshchina denying any claims against Russian forces, saying they had supposedly saved her life. By then, she had already spent 10 days in captivity.
I am Victoria Roshchina. I am a journalist with Hromadske TV. I was traveling as part of a humanitarian convoy from Zaporizhzhia to Mariupol. During a document check in Berdyansk, photos of Russian military equipment were found on my phone, which led to my detention for clarification of the circumstances. The Russian side explained to me that traveling to Mariupol was dangerous for my life, as the city was blocked. I was provided with housing and food, with decent living conditions. I have no complaints against the Russian side. The actions of the Russian armed forces may have saved my life and health. I urge everyone to remain reasonable and resolve issues through peaceful means.
She was released on March 21st. Just 5 days after her release, Victoria published an article about what she had endured in captivity. They brought me food, but I refused it. In the first days, I survived on the small supplies I had brought from Zaporizhzhia. When they ran out, I drank sweet tea. I could feel my strength leaving me. Even standing up became hard, she wrote. On July 24, 2023, Victoria Roshchina went to occupied territory for the last time. She was investigating disappearances and secret torture sites in Enerhodar, Berdyansk, and Melitopol. She planned the route herself. Complex and dangerous. On July 25th, Victoria crossed into Russia through Latvia. From there, she reached the occupied territory. Victoria was already in Melitopol on July 26th. She was trying to find temporary housing in several cities and connect with people who had been in captivity or knew how the torture sites operated. She made her last contact on July 28th, already from the city of Enerhodar. After that, her trail disappears. 45 journalists from 13 international media outlets joined forces to uncover what happened to Victoria Roshchina. Forbidden Stories, The Guardian, The Washington Post, Le Monde, Die Zeit, Der Spiegel, ZDF, Paper Trail Media, iStories, France 24, Ukrainska Pravda, Der Standard. They conducted over 50 interviews with survivors of Russian captivity and individuals who had worked within the prison system. Among them, 48 former detainees and their relatives, 4 former prison guards who agreed to testify, and 8 Russian human rights defenders who provided expert analysis. This investigation became an attempt to finish what Victoria herself had started. They were able to confirm that she was detained in the occupied territory. At first, without any investigation or court decision, she was held in unofficial detention sites. One of them was the police building at 17 Budivnikiv Avenue in Enerhodar. Witnesses call it a torture chamber, and they have reasons to say so. Over the course of 2 years, dozens of people passed through these basements. They were interrogated, tortured, broken. One of them, Serhai, was taken there 3 times. He was beaten unconscious, had his teeth knocked out, his ribs broken. The worst part, electric torture. Clips were attached to his ears and fingers, electric current passed through, water poured on him. The voltage increased. The officers themselves cynically called this method a call to Putin. Victoria likely went through the same. Her cellmate recalls that the journalist was covered in bruises and said wires had been attached to her ears. The torture didn't stop at beatings. Witnesses report sexualized violence, even between prisoners. Serhii was forced to rape another detainee. When he refused, both were brutally beaten. These aren't exceptions. This is a system. And it's the system Victoria was trying to document. After several days in the Enerhodar police station, Victoria was taken to another location, occupied Melitopol. According to available information, she ended up in one of the city's darkest places, the so-called garages, an unofficial prison and torture site in an industrial zone, where detained Ukrainians had been taken since the spring of 2022. Former detainees recall concrete walls, metal gates, no markings. Inside, a 10 by 5 meter room. No windows. Along the walls, filthy chairs, old wooden doors laid out as beds, a bucket toilet behind a plastic curtain, dirty blankets on top. In the center, a broken couch. There was a separate block used for working with prisoners. There they beat people, used electric torture, forced them to sign false confessions. They pulled out teeth, especially the gold ones. Victoria spent nearly 6 months in Melitopol. She was moved several times. From the detention center back to the garages. No trial, no charges, no word to her family. In early 2024, Victoria's trail disappears again. But soon, a new point appears on the map of her captivity. Pre-trial detention center number 2 in the city of Taganrog, Rostov region. No lawyer ever got in. No one from the Red Cross or the UN was allowed inside. What happens behind its walls is beyond any form of oversight. This was stated openly by the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Alice Jill Edwards. We know that Victoria was indeed in Taganrog from the testimony of another Ukrainian woman who shared a cell with her. She said that before being transferred to Russia, Victoria had been held in Enerhodar. Beatings at the entrance, that was just the reception. What followed were dozens of torture methods. Starvation, humiliation, beatings, the screams from nearby cells that echo through the night and never let you forget where you are. This is where Victoria Roshchina ended up, in Taganrog Pretrial Detention Center.
It's clear that it's organized. It's clear that it's systematic. That level of organization can only be approved at the highest levels. There are members of the FSB, the security forces, actors within the prison service, as well as the military that are involved in this type of torture. Of course, they're violations of the laws of war.
Everything we know about Victoria during this period, her condition, where she was held, the treatment she received, comes from the testimony of her former cellmate. But the broader picture of pre-trial detention center number 2 is just as horrifying. confirmed by dozens of other stories, investigations, and witness accounts. Victoria's father contacted the International Committee of the Red Cross. They confirmed her imprisonment, but said they had no access to her. No parcels, no letters, not even confirmation if she was alive. People like this are called incommunicado detainees, cut off from the world. They do not exist, not in registers, not in reports, not on prisoner exchange lists. Victoria's story is not an isolated one. Yelizaveta was a former soldier. By the time of the full-scale invasion, she was already a civilian, but that didn't matter. She was stopped at a checkpoint, passed through a filtration camp, and sent to Taganrog. The reason? She didn't admit she had served. They stripped her completely, filmed her from every angle. They gave her a nightgown, stained underwear, pants that didn't fit, a hat, and a jacket made for a giant. And then they said, "Get ready, we'll show you all the pleasures of life." They twisted her arms and dragged her down the hallway, blindfolded. Batons, metal pipes, shouting, dogs. The cell, 3 bunks, bars on the window, a thin mattress, a toilet in the corner. Every meal came with humiliation. Goose position, face to the wall, and the shouted greeting. "Good morning, citizen officer." In 2024, the Washington Post, together with analyst Jarrett Lay, created 3D models of the SIZO number 2 cells, based on testimonies from those who survived. They revealed what Russia hides behind concrete. It was within these walls that Victoria Roshchina was held. A year earlier, Maureen Inhachikinda also testified about the conditions inside this detention center. According to her, a metal furnace the size of a human body had been built inside the prison. It was used to exert psychological and physical pressure on the detainees. The food, underbaked bread, water with cabbage, fish with entrails. The water was green, with a fishy smell. There was no soap, just one rag, used for everything. Another prisoner, a defender of Mariupol and Azovstal, Alexander, spent 4 months in this detention center. According to him, the facility had 9 blocks, each with 15 to 16 cells. Women were held separately. The punishment cell was on the 6th floor. Food was minimal, 200 to 300 grams a day. Prisoners counted it as 4 to 5 spoonfuls. Over a few months, Alexander lost 40 kilograms. He says there were also civilians, for example, people from the Kherson region. After 9 months in April, the Russian side officially confirmed for the first time she was in captivity. But no details were given, neither the reasons for her detention nor her whereabouts. According to cellmate, Victoria was brutally tortured, electrocuted, beaten, and stabbed. Her physical condition was critical. Her weight dropped to 30 kilograms. She could barely stand, and she constantly begged for medical help, which was almost never provided. Eventually, the guards began forcing her to eat. In March 2024, representatives of the Russian Ombudsman and, reportedly, the Red Cross visited the facility. But Victoria was hidden. She was isolated in a separate room so that no one could see her. Her condition continued to deteriorate. Victoria's father believes she began a hunger strike on purpose, to force a prisoner exchange or at least get transferred to a hospital. And it worked. In the summer of 2024, she was hospitalized. She was so exhausted, she couldn't walk on her own. They gave her an IV drip, inserted a catheter, and under guard, she was returned to solitary confinement. In August 2024, Victoria made contact for the last time. She was allowed a brief phone call with her father. According to Ukraine's military intelligence, Victoria was included in a prisoner exchange list in September. Everything was ready. On September 8, 2024, the guards took her out of her cell to bring her home. They asked a girl from her cell to help her walk down. But downstairs, a guard said, "The journalist is not going," and added, "It's her own fault." This was the last known sign of Victoria alive. A few weeks later, Victoria's father received an email from the Russian side, a notification of his daughter's death. According to it, she allegedly died on September 19, 2024, while in Russian captivity. In February 2025, the body of Victoria Roshchina was returned to Ukraine as part of a prisoner exchange. It arrived under number 757, marked as unidentified male and labeled with the abbreviation SPAS. This abbreviation can be interpreted as general lesion of heart arteries. But for those who saw her body, it sounded like a cynical cover-up. The body was emaciated, down to 30 kilograms. Victoria had her teeth knocked out, ribs broken, traces of electrical burns, stab wounds. Her eyes, brain, and a part of her trachea were missing. These were the very parts that could have indicated the true cause of death: suffocation, electric shock, or massive beatings. Her body was not simply destroyed, it was prepared to stay silent. On August 8, 2025, a farewell was held for Victoria in Kiev. To the sound of church bells and the Ukrainian national anthem, she was seen off on her final journey. A closed casket was carried out of the St. Michael's Golden Dome Cathedral. On Independence Square, people were waiting for her, holding candles, portraits, flowers. Victoria Roshchina was buried at Bykov Cemetery. She wasn't just a journalist, she was someone who was supposed to live. Victoria Roshchina was born on October 6, 1996. She died just a few weeks short of her 28th birthday. She entered journalism at the age of 16. And from her very first stories, she chose the sharpest topics: crime, courts, occupation, war. Victoria reported on life in occupied Crimea, in Enerhodar, on the sham referendums in Donetsk region, and brought back photo reports from the ruins of Mariupol. Even before the full-scale war, she had traveled to Moscow to film a documentary about Ukrainian sailors held in captivity. She met the full-scale invasion on February 24th in the city of Shchastya in Luhansk region. Russian troops were already entering the town, but she stayed and told her editors just one thing: "I'm a journalist. Someone has to tell what's happening here." She went where truth is beaten out with electric shocks, where names are erased from documents, where people disappear without a trace. Even Victoria's death became a message. This is what happens to those who seek the truth. In August 2025, President Volodymyr Zelensky posthumously awarded Victoria Roshchina the Order of Freedom for courage, patriotism, and her selfless defense of the sovereignty and independence of the Ukrainian state and of constitutional human rights and freedoms. He called her death a blow to Ukrainian journalism and reminded the world many still remain in Russian captivity. Journalists, civic activists, teachers, students, and ordinary people. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, 82 media workers have been killed, 34 journalists injured, and 14 are still missing. Since 2014, over 100 Ukrainian journalists have been held in Russian captivity. How many civilians, soldiers, volunteers, teachers, doctors, and students have been there, and still are, is hard to imagine. Victoria Roshchina is just one name on that list. But that name forever stands as a symbol of the price truth must pay.